The wolf climbing the hill is hungrier than the wolf at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
So don't ever believe you're the wolf at the top of the hill. Even if you are, don't believe that.
Yeah, it's true.
Mind fuck yourself into not being the wolf at the top of the hill, because if you believe that, the wolf that's climbing the hill is going to take your spot.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, is I think when you get X amount of way into doing anything in life, when you're climbing, when you're in the ascension, it's easy to believe that you're better than you are. And then all of a sudden you get to a new vantage point and you can see what's out there. And you see how big the landscape is, and you're like, oh, wow, I'm not that good.
And for us, Instagram did that.
Oh, yeah, big time.
I mean, that's the other wave that hit the tattooing was here we all are still thinking we're so great. Then Instagram opens up, and within a year or two, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Wait a sec, who's this? Wait. Who's this guy in Poland? Who's this guy in Spain? What the fuck are they doing in Australia? And suddenly it's like, oh my God, we're in a sea of mega talented artists. And then the fire was lit.
Shit's about to go down.
I'm feeling something in my spirit.
Chats and Tatts with Aaron Della Vedova.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Chats and Tatts with me, your host, Aaron Della Vedova. I've talked a lot on the show about the relationships I was lucky enough to forge after 30 years of tattooing with these clients that get, many hours of tattooing with me. And really looking back on my career, it's the most fruitful, and the thing I'm most grateful for is that above the portfolio, above the opportunity of being an artist for a living my whole life, these relationships is what I cherish the most today. And the man I have on today is an example of that. He's become a good friend. We spent many hours tattooing together. I'm guessing, but probably over 80 hours of tattooing on him. Back in his younger years, he went off to create a quite successful life. And I also think that story might be interesting to you guys, because I think there's just a ton of people out there who would love to follow a dream. Maybe you work for somebody and you want to be the boss, or you want to run the company and things like that. And this guy's journey from down in the trenches to where he is today is a very relatable, understandable way to do that through simple, practical philosophies. And I know he's going to share a lot of those and how he was able to do that with us today. So with all of that being said, please welcome my good friend, Adam Stemmler.
Aaron, thank you so much for having me on today. I think this is a little bit overdue, and it's good to kind of reconnect with you, man. It's been a while. I had to dip out of our tattoo journey together for a hot minute because I developed a pretty serious autoimmune disease. We could maybe get onto that at some point in the conversation or not. But it's nice to be in the presence of someone. I feel like you're one of my friends where we don't keep score on each other. I have certain friends that I cannot talk to for 5, 7, 10 years. And I pick up the phone and I call them, and it's like nothing has changed. Nothing has skipped a beat. There's nothing petty, like, why didn't you call me on my birthday, or none of that scorekeeping or whatever. And it's always nice to reconnect with old friends that you haven't seen in a while.
That is 100% true, and I think that's a sign of a true soul friendship. You know, you meet people in life sometimes, and I'm a little woo-woo with this kind of stuff, but I do believe in reincarnation. I do believe we dance this dance many times, and there's just certain characters that I'm like, we know each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in this life, we're going to do some tattooing, and we're going to hang out a lot, and then you're going to dip out and go up north and start an empire, and then and so I know I'll see you again. Maybe not in this lifetime, but in this case, it is in this lifetime. And this is an appropriate, I think, time for us to reconvene and kind of catch up on all that you've done since we kind of split apart for a little while as you went out and followed your dreams.
Yeah, it's interesting because we started, I think, my right sleeve right as I was at that crossroads in life where I was like, all right, I know I'm on the precipice of doing something new. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that tattoo journey helped kind of set me up for the next phase. And then, I moved up to the Bay Area before we started on my torso. Mm-hmm. And then unfortunately I had to dip out for a little while because of health things, but I'm back, I'm at it. And here we are reconnecting again. So,
well, I'm honored to have you here, my friend. And let's get right to it. Like, gosh, there's so many layers of this story, and the tattoo layer is there. But I think maybe let's round that out at the end of the show. I want to talk more about those, unless it comes up naturally.
Sure.
But I want to hear a little bit right out of the gates of, how you grew up, how you ended up in the craft cocktail world, and how that led you to your current, I don't know what we call it, entrepreneurial success in the restaurant industry. As a restaurateur, is that the right word?
I think restaurateur, consultant, all of the above.
Right.
I mean, at the core of it, I'm a bartender, but I'm a bartender that kind of was able to successfully navigate some new paths.
Yeah.
And that's been quite the adventure, and a huge learning curve has come along with that. But yeah, I would say all of those things are true.
Okay. Well, how'd you do it? Tell us. How
All
did
right.
you do that? How you do that?
So I guess my introduction into hospitality, food and beverage really started with my mom one day. And my mom was like, hey, by the way, if you didn't notice, we don't have a ton of money. If you want to get a car when you're 16, you might want to think about getting a job now. By the way, I'll absolutely help you and I'll be there to support you. But if you could also get a job and, learn the value of $1 and kind of be a little bit self-sustaining on making a little bit of money for yourself, it would help our situation out substantially. And it was one of the best things my mom ever encouraged me to do, because I actually got a job when I was 13, even though legally you're supposed to be 14 to have a worker's permit in the state of California. I fudged around that. And then I got a job working in service. And then shortly after that job, I found myself working in bars and restaurants. And at that time, I was working at like corporate run restaurant, like places like Chevy's and TGI Fridays and places like that. But I gravitated to that relatively quickly. And I just, I come from a lineage of people that serve people. My mom was a nurse, or, involved in medical care in some facet or another the entirety of her life. And then my father worked in nonprofit as a CFO. My brother's in the military. So I come from a lineage of people that are just, we serve people. It's what we do.
Service.
And it's something that I gravitated to really quickly. And then I also had a decent amount of social anxiety and a number of different things as a kid that made me feel very alienated. I found out as a much older adult that I have what some people would call personality disabilities, which I'm happy to talk about at some point, that I was able to just kind of leverage and use those quote unquote disabilities as strengths. And finding what I excelled at and what I didn't. But my coping mechanism of not relating to people and not really relating to man and woman's inhumanity against men and women of other people was serving people, and just that interaction, and just that one moment in time where you have the opportunity to make someone's day amazing by just saying the right thing, doing the right thing, anticipating their needs. And I got addicted. And I mean, I fully became an addict of making people happy. And then I also think too, being a child of divorce, and I was kind of the peacekeeper in my family. I was the one that always wanted everyone to be happy, because I grew up in a relatively chaotic environment to a certain degree. That really served me moving into service, because I had it ingrained into my outlook of life to like, hey, try to make everyone happy all the time.
It's an amazing story of perseverance, and also being optimistic, looking at the bright side. You could easily have attached to there were so many moments in that story where you could have attached to the victim side of it.
Yeah.
And then attributed any failure that came your way to that reason. Well, this isn't working out because I didn't have a stable home, or this isn't working out because I have a personality disorder. You have found a way to capitalize on all of those struggles.
Well, I would be lying if I said I didn't adhere to some of those cop-outs at various points in my development. So I've absolutely gone down those roads where I identified as a victim, or I was like, hey, it's not my fault, or, this could have been better, or I could have been set up for more success if I would have done this or that or the other. But ultimately, at various points, and I still kind of go through that sine cosine wave where I, fall into it and come out of it or whatever. But I just ultimately realized that those mindsets weren't serving me.
Well, your ability to articulate it the way you just did tells me you've healed that. I mean, yes, it pops up, of course.
Sure.
We all have self-doubt. Me too. I mean, all the time. I mean, I just listen to the narrator in my head, and I just have to keep telling him, delete. I say delete.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever he says something negative, just delete, dude, delete. I'm not thinking that thought today. It's not going to help me. I don't see how this helps me. It's making me feel bad, actually. And so, but it never really fully went away. I think it was more about me just finding a technique to cope with that inner voice of, well, you shouldn't be successful because you come from this type of place or this type of background, and you shouldn't have success. Was a big one for me.
Yeah.
I felt guilty.
I felt so much guilt.
I still feel guilt.
Yeah.
I'm an artist. I should be broke.
Yeah.
And if I'm not, what kind of artist am I? Am I the fucking sellout artist?
Yeah.
Am I? And then I have to, ground myself and look at the work I've created and go, no, you're not. You're not. And you're worth money. People want to pay you money for the art you create. It's okay. It's okay. Accept it. Such a strange I don't know what that is. But
And I mean,
point is, that still comes up for me too. But I have found a way to move through it most days.
and my coping mechanism for coming to terms with the small amount of success that I've had in my journey, and I like to say that I'm a self-made hunter-dare. I mean, obviously I'm doing a little bit better than that, but everything came from a very kind of blue-collar hustle, whatever. I mean, I literally sat in the trenches and ate shit for, 20-ish years before I kind of came out on the other side, or maybe not 20, but damn near that many years. But I stopped to reflect on that, and I'm like, well, is the world a better or worse place by having people that have seen it, lived it, done it, came up from the bottom, got to the middle or whatever? When those people start to get a little bit of success and a little bit of money and the capital to kind of do awesome things within their communities, is the net result of that positive or negative? Versus, these trust fund kids that got everything handed to them and they're just reinvesting in these, companies that are maybe doing good things, maybe doing bad things. And I dare say that having more people that came up from the bottom and that have good perspective and actually want to do good things in the world, getting rewarded with money so that they can go out and build opportunities for other people, that's not a bad thing.
Not at all. I tell myself the same mantra. Hey, man, if there's going to be somebody making some good money in this world, I hope it's the artist.
Yeah.
The world could use more beauty. The world could use more creativity, more novel ideas, more love, and generally speaking, the artists of the world are always trying to find ways to convey that to the masses. And there were times in history where they were highly valued, in the Renaissance periods and stuff like that. And even today, I think the artists are being, well, my own career is a testament to that, are being, honored again to some degree. But the life of an artist for many is still a struggle. It's no straight path. Like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to have this much money in 10 years, where you could start a career and be almost guaranteed those numbers.
Oh, yeah.
It's a risk, we'll see.
I am stoked to announce that Solon Clothing is now a sponsor of the show. I've known Ryan and Jeremy for 20 plus years. Amazing human beings, huge supporters of the tattoo community. If you're a tattoo artist and you want to do a t-shirt design with Solon, you can send that over to design@solonclothing.com, and they would love to see what you've got. Again, thank you, Solon, for your support. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jeremy. And now back to the show.
Historically speaking, a lot of what we consider to be the best artists of all time, they died completely broke. So the fact that we're now in a world that appreciates that, where you can monetize that, you can get a return on that, it gives me hope for the future. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's
So-
a good time to be an artist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then back to my journey. So I get a job in service, whatever. I'm a relatively, without sounding pretentious, I was a smart kid. I was in gate classes. School was very easy for me, but I think the orderly component of the way we present education in this country, I checked out of that relatively early. I mean, I think I was in middle school when I was like, yeah, this is bullshit. I'm not into this. I'll play the game just well enough to get through the ranks, but I'm not going to overly invest in a system that I don't really have an abundance of faith in. And then if you look into the way the educational system in this country was developed, we adopted a system from Prussia, and I think like 1904. And our educational system is really built to create good citizens. It's not necessarily conducive to making great thinkers. So I checked out of that relatively young, even though, I played the game well enough to know that I get good enough grades to get into college and all that other good stuff. And then while I was going through that process, I got my hands on some books that I learned so much more than I ever learned in school. And, I read Four Agreements much later in life when I was an adult. But, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was in, I think, high school. I read Think and Grow.
First books, too.
I read Think and Grow Rich. I read The Millionaire Next Door. And I read all of these books. And I'm just like, man, why doesn't state-sponsored education teach kids fundamental literacy when it comes to financials? And then I zoom out a level and I'm like, well, it's probably easier to govern people who don't have financial freedom than it is to corral people that feel like they need something. And I'm like, well, maybe it's being done intentionally, maybe not. Who knows? I'm not going to go down that, but
Well, it's also one shoe can't fit all.
no.
And that's the thing with our educational system. It's like it's one shoe.
Yep.
I mean, this kid definitely needs a different type of education than that kid, and that kid, and vice versa. Yeah, they just shove them into one box, and I think that box works for a lot of people. But I had the same story as you about middle school, same thing. Like, I can't invest in this. I don't see the point. My answer was more become a punk rock anarchist kind of kid and revolt against everything, and that's a longer story. But I totally get where you're coming from. I felt this exact same way.
I actually found solace in my local punk rock scene at the same time. I was, I had my mom dropping me off at our local punk club, which I think maybe still is here in San Diego, but I was going to Selma, 3, 4, 5.
Still here?
Yeah. I mean, different location. I think it's in its 3rd or 4th location now. But, I think at my time when I was in that scene, it was Generation 2, the second location over by UC San Diego. And I was getting dropped off at Selma, 3 nights a week. And I wouldn't even know who was playing. I'm just like, hey, I want to go see a show, drop me off. I'll be, pick me up at this time. And my mom was super cool about it. So, kind of developed my own personality through my local punk rock scene. I was skateboarding, doing all the things that Southern California teenagers do. And then when I was applying to colleges, at the time, my mom wasn't securely in a new relationship, and I didn't feel good about going too far away from home because I felt like I had that connection with my mother, and I needed to kind of be in proximity just in case anything happened. I think when you grow up with a single mom, you have a different kind of relationship with your mom, and you kind of want to become a protector to a certain degree, especially as you're becoming a man. When I'm 13, 14, and I was the first kid in my school to grow. I think I was almost 6 feet tall when I was 13. So I became very cognizant of being my mother's protector when I was maybe 13-ish. And then as I'm deciding where I'm going to go for college and I make my decision right in proximity to that time, my mom meets this amazing man and gets remarried. And
so
then
you're relieved of duty.
Yeah, because I was like, because he was going to be able to protect and provide for her in ways that I never could. And my stepdad, also devout Christian, amazing, honorable man, really taught me a lot of things that my dad wasn't really capable of teaching me, because my dad always encouraged me to be an artist and to defy what people's traditional lines of, you can't think this way. My dad would be like, no, think that way. Go down all of these weird rabbit holes, challenge people, prove people wrong. Where my stepdad came into my life at a very pivotal time, and he was like, be an honorable man. Be impeccable with your word. Before I ever read 4 Agreements, my stepdad was like, hey, your word, like, if you want to be a real honorable man, your word has to be a reflection of you. So if you want to be honorable, your word has to be honorable. And he taught me all these things. And it was a really amazing time for him to come into my life, because as a teenager, I was doing some not so great stuff at the time. And I think that my life would have been very different had he not come into my life at that exact moment. And he kind of put the fear. I mean, like, I always respected my mother, but I wasn't necessarily afraid of her. And then all of a sudden I have this reformed, like, he was basically a Hell's Angel before he got saved and, came to develop a direct relationship with Christ and, became a full-fledged Christian. So I'm like, oh man, this guy could snap me like a toothpick if he wanted to. So there's just like a different, your propensity to want to kind of like fall in line is a little bit greater as a young man when you have someone that you're like, oh man, this guy could crush me if he wanted to. But the timing, I mean, serendipity is around every corner, and the timing on that one was just perfect for my development at the time.
Or we're in a simulation, and the simulation just plays out exactly right on time and on schedule. I don't know, because those synchronicities and those stories, I got 100 of them myself, and it's kind of like, I don't know, the odds of it all coming together like that are like 1,000,000 to 1, I think. How the hell is it God? Are we in a simulation?
Well, is the simulation God?
Is the simulation God? I don't know, but there's just a lot of coincidences happening here.
Yeah. And even like Neil Tyson deGrasse, who's relatively conservative about his ability to kind of want to go down odd rabbit holes and thinking, despite the fact that he's just completely brilliant. And, I can only assume his IQ and cognitive function is off the map. But he says that, like, I give it a 50-50 that we're living in a simulation.
Yeah. So you got smart people actually leaning in that direction.
I mean, Elon Musk says it's...
But good point. The simulation doesn't mean lack of God.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how the Christian side would hear that. Like, oh my God, simulation, so you don't believe in God. Well, I don't know. The simulation could be God, or it could be created by God. I don't know. But I do get the sense that there is some coordination happening in people's lives.
Yeah.
People show up at the right moment at the right time. If you're listening and you're asking the universe for something, a door or a human or something always kind of shows up. So something seems to be orchestrating this. I don't know what it is. I mean, I've had my experiences on DMT. I think you have too. I think
Definitely
I've seen some things that indicate that is what's happening. I don't fully understand that machine behind the curtain, but there's a machine behind this curtain.
100%.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it operating. And I don't quite. It's like, be like the first time in a car, and then this is a car. How does it work? And the guy just opens the hood, and you look under, and you're like, okay, that I don't know what that is, but that's obviously a machine that makes this thing move.
Yeah.
And then they close the door.
Yeah. And, I have an interesting take on my own spirituality and everything else. And I think that various experiences I've had with plant medicine, and I definitely refer to these substances as plant medicine because that's the only reason I ever want to go down those rabbit holes or whatever. Everything I've experienced and everything I've seen, if I were to reduce the conversation down to two hypotheticals, one being that everything is a byproduct of chance and randomness, or hypothetically, on the other hand, is there some sort of greater universal intelligence, knowledge, or whatever that might have some influence on all of this? You could call that God, you could call that a simulation or whatever. To think that the former is more likely would be very unwise based on what I know.
I explain it the same way because I believe the same thing you believe. I think there's something orchestrating this stuff, and I'm getting more comfortable using the word God. I avoided using that word my whole life because it meant I'd seen a lot of hypocrisy in the Catholic religion that I was raised in. So to use the word God, I felt like I was saying I was part of something that I didn't want to be a part of. But nowadays, I just kind of started getting more warmed up to it again. Fuck it, it's God. Let's just call it God. I don't know. There's just a force, man. It's over there, and it's taking care of us.
Well, I think we both suffered from a similar attachment in the sense that we were very invested in what men had to say about God or about matters pertaining to God. We weren't very invested in matters that were just pertaining to God. And anything that has value can also be, anything that could be used as a tool could also be used as a weapon. And we have seen numerous times throughout history where religion gets used for amazing things, but it's also been manipulated to be used for some of the most nefarious things that have ever happened. And I think people that are intellectually dishonest, or they're not looking at the full spectrum, they like to look at the negative and they're like, oh, God's bad for all these reasons. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, you want to manipulate something that has power for nefarious purposes? Absolutely. You can produce some really terrible outcomes. Yeah. But what about the other side of the equation? Don't cherry pick. Don't straw man that. Steel man that. Look at the other side. Look at the fact that, you can say whatever you want to say about the Catholic Church, but there's no single organization on the planet that feeds more hungry people every year. Yep. So you got to take the good with the bad and the bad with the good.
Yep. You can't judge an organization by its members.
Nope.
By the people that are running it, so to speak. No, I've become way more comfortable with that idea. But I think we're on the same page, at least in regards to the fact that I do believe there's something bigger going on. It's not just random chance that these events are unfolding. And in your case, having this man show up in your life with the perfect energy frequency and the perfect message at a time when you were developing in a certain way. Yeah. And if it hadn't happened, I'm sure who knows what would have happened. No. But it did happen that way. And that's cool. For me, it was the military. I mean, my dad.
That's right. I keep forgetting that you're in the military.
My dad, they were divorced. Our stories are almost identical. As you go through this, I'm like, this is my story. The divorced parents, and I have a great dad. Didn't see him enough. I needed a dad around. I needed a man in the house. I was scared. Same thing. I wasn't scared of my mom. I loved her, but I was like, could do whatever I wanted. There was no threat of any responsibility or being in trouble for doing something. So I was a bad kid. And Dad was too busy and not around to really set me straight. But yeah, military took me my first 2 years. I fought pretty hard my first 2 years, and then got around some grown ass men in that system that were like, dude, what are you doing? And they just started teaching me grown man advice, And I was like, oh, be a man of your. And then I started reading a lot of the books that you're talking about. Well, it's the same kind of similar path.
And I think the very amazing thing about when my stepfather Larry came into my life is my dad. My biological father did an amazing job of encouraging me to grow the biggest sail for my boat that I could ever grow. And every time I had a weird, abstract idea, when I was leaning into chaos and like, hey, I'm going to challenge something that everyone says I can't do, my dad would be like, yes, do it. I back you. I'm here for you. And then my stepdad taught me how to have an anchor. Mm-hmm. And then my mom was just that sheer source of love, compassion. I mean, I've never met a better human in my entire life than my mother. So I had her in the middle of that kind of ecosystem.
That's the perfect triangle, dude.
Yeah. And it was, and honestly,
you got the dreamer, you got the guy who's going to make practical advice, and you got the love machine.
Yeah. And honestly, my stepmom, amazing human too. So I got good perspective from her as well. So I got all these different forces coming together at the right time. So I decided to go to San Diego State. I had read all those books about the difference between passive, earned and portfolio income, and earned income is the worst way to make money and everything else. And when I started going to San Diego State, I was like, I am not going to go into debt while I'm in college. So I got a job working at a fine dining restaurant that I think is still here in San Diego. Apologies for not having my finger on the pulse here. I've been gone for almost 13 years now. But I worked at Bertrand at Mr. A's.
Oh, Mr. A's?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're still there. I just had dinner there 6 months ago.
Yeah. So
Still an awesome place, too.
Yeah. Oh,
Best
unbelievable.
view in San Diego.
Hands down, best view.
Yeah.
And the fact that a family, obviously the Alicio family were the first people to have that, and then they sold it to Bertrand at some point in the early 2000s. But the fact that a family was able to convince the city to allow them to build a 16-story building in the middle of a flight path, you're like, man, you got to have some serious muscle behind the scenes to be able to kind of get those entitlements done. But yeah,
you wouldn't get it done today.
No. So hands down the best. I mean, the planes literally come down at eye level.
Cool. It's so cool.
So I think
I didn't know you worked there. That's cool.
I worked there for 4 years.
I used to go there back in the day. I'm surprised we didn't bump into each other up at that spot.
And I was either 19 or about to be 19 when I got hired there. A friend of college from mine was like, hey, a lot of our friend group was working there. Hey, I can get you a job there. And then that really opened my eyes because I never knew that people lived that way. We had regulars that would come in 4 or 5 nights a week, and they would be dropping money on.
Oh, that back? It's still a nice place. But I mean, back in those days, it was
the spot.
So if you were rolling, you were there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, so we would be closing down the restaurant at night, and then we would have what was called captains. They didn't call them waiters, but, they had their own sections and everything else. And the captains would always either be, drinking little bits of wine from, by the glass stuff at the bar, or oftentimes regular guests would order really expensive wine, and they would leave a little bit for the staff. I mean, by the way, for those of you guys that go out to bars and restaurants, the biggest baller boss move you can ever do is if you order a really, really nice bottle of wine at a bar or restaurant, save a couple ounces and offer it to the staff on your way out. It's one of the biggest tokens of appreciation because a lot of those servers and those bartenders that are serving you, they don't have the financial means to experience that.
Right.
And if you give them that last ounce or two and be like, hey, this is for you, share it with your staff.
Yeah. At least try it. At least taste it.
Well, at least the next guest that comes in, they're going to be able to sell that even better.
Right. They can say they've had it.
So that's a boss move, just so you have free advice from
I
someone
like
who's
that.
been in the industry for almost 30 years. So we'd be sitting around the waiter station at the end of the night, and we'd be buffing wine glasses because, you don't want to get a smudged wine glass when you're at a fine dining restaurant. And the captains would be drinking wine. And then one day, I'll never forget this man. His name was Dave Negretti. And Dave would put wine, and, I was 19, so no one would let me drink anything. But he'd be like, Adam, put your nose in this. What do you smell? I'd be like, I smell, X, Y, and Z. And he's like, that's pretty good. What about this one? I'm like, oh, I get A, B, and C. And he's like, that's also pretty good. And then, I stayed working there until I was about 22. And then, when I turned 21, I was able to actually kind of taste wine with him and everything else. And then one day Dave pulled me aside and he was like, hey, dude, you have a gift for this. I think it would be really unwise of you to not explore this in some capacity or another. And ultimately, he gave me the confidence that I needed to take and pass my first level sommelier exam, which I did when I think I was like 27 or 25, something like that.
How cool. Kudos to you, Dave.
Dude, what a good dude. And there was another captain that worked there named Rob Rubin who really kind of was invested in my growth. And he was like, hey, keep doing this. You have a knack for this, whatever.
Good mentors. You had
amazing
good mentors. It's always part of a success story.
Serendipity, who knows? Maybe I manifested that. Maybe that was the universe just smiling on me. But one way or another, I got put in the right place at the right time.
Cool.
So I graduate to being the lead food runner at Mr. A's. And I kind of get to the point where I'm like, I want to be a captain. I want to be a waiter. And I talked to my manager, and she was like, I don't think Bert's going to go for it. I finally just muster up the courage to talk to Bert myself. And I was like, hey, I want to be a captain. He was like, yeah, you look too young.
I was just thinking that at that place, that's an old dog
Yeah.
restaurant. You
He's
don't
like-
have kids serving you.
He's like, I'm sorry, you look too young. My guests won't take you seriously. And I was like, all right, 90 days. I'll give you 90 days. You promote me or I leave. And he's like, all right, fine. But I already know the answer to that. So, 80 days comes around. I'm like, hey, Bert. He's like, yep, I know. So 90 days. He's like, yeah, sorry. I love you. Now, in so many words, like, hey, I really like you, but no, it's not going to work. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm leaving. He's like, best of luck to you. And the funniest thing, the very first time I came in as a guest, after I had stopped working there, after being there for 4 years, Bert came and sat down at my table with myself and my date at the time, and he said more to me in 30 minutes as a guest at his restaurant than he said to me in 4 years. And he just gave me so many amazing words of encouragement, and he's a very charming, he's that French, flamboyant, he's got a wife and everything, but just that perfectly kind of articulated, flamboyant kind of French personality that can light up any room that he walks into. And he gave me a lot of words of encouragement. Yeah. And I walked out of that and I was like, all right, what's next? And the next logical step for me, I think, was bartending. And the reason why I came to that conclusion, I go back to when I was in high school, and I think I was a junior at the time. And I won't say how I procured said alcohol, but I was able to convince someone to buy me a bunch of alcohol before I was going on a ski trip. So we're going on one of these, I think they called them SWAT, like summer winter action tour trips that they would do for the high school kids. And I have a bag just full of booze, different types of flavored vodka and everything else. And one of my favorite places to go when I was a teenager was Jamba Juice. I would always go to Jamba Juice and get different smoothies and everything else. So I'd always watch what the people behind the counter would be doing. And I'm like, oh, I could do that. So then, after we would be skiing all day, there would be party. We're the high school kids, looking to party, let loose. And then word got out. They're like, hey, go to Adam's cabin because he's got the stash. And I was basically making Jamba Juice style smoothies that were spiked.
Your first craft cocktails.
Yeah, straight up. I'm just blending up.
How many years ago is this?
I mean, I was probably 16 at the time, so we're talking about 26 years ago.
Before craft cocktail was even a term.
Yeah, this is still in the 90s. I mean, in New York and maybe various...
Maybe there,
yeah, they were starting to come up. Yeah. But I would put these drinks that I would concoct in front of friends of mine, and they would taste them, and I just watched their eyes light up. And I feel like
I got hooked.
Once again, I just got addicted to that feeling. So once again, I was like, all right, I'm getting back into the bartending game. So I was able to get a part-time bartending job at a spot up in the Vista, San Marcos area. Okay. And then it was a spot filler for me because I knew I didn't want to be there long term. And a lot of people I knew were working at this nightclub in downtown San Diego. It's called the Aubergine. It's where Flux currently is. I don't know if Flux is still there, but
I'm not sure on that one.
Where Flux was, if it's not still there.
Know the names, but never been.
Yeah, 4th and Island. And I'd actually worked there for a hot second as a server previous to that, and I left there because the guys that were running the place, they were in it for all the wrong reasons. There's people that get into the bar and restaurant industry for the right reasons. They want to be on the periphery of the party, but there's people that make themselves the center of the party. And oftentimes people that do the latter, they don't have very much longevity. So they were there for the wrong reasons. I dare say there was a lot of drugs going through the place if I'm being honest, if I'm speculating. So anyway, I ended up leaving there. I also had some health problems at the time that led me to leave. And then for whatever reason, I felt drawn to go back there. And I was like, I'm going to go back there. I'm going to reinvent myself as a bartender. There's new owners there. These owners seem to know what they're doing. So I go in, got my resume, got my best outfit on, walk up the stairs of where the office was because the office was upstairs on top of the property. And this really amazing Southern gal, her name's Ruth. Everyone calls her Ruthie. She was the GM at the time. And I was like, hey, I just wanted to drop off a resume. I'm interested in a bartending job here. She's like, yeah, we don't hire bartenders off the street. I'm like, really? Just like that? She's like, yeah, just like that. I'm like, all right, I'm going to come back in 2 weeks. And she's like, well, I'm going to say the same thing. I'm like, that's fine. So I came back in 2 weeks. I'm like, hey, it's Adam again. She's like, yeah, we're still not hiring. I'm like, cool, I'm going to come back in 2 weeks. And she's like, you're serious? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not kidding. I went in at least 5 or 6 times.
Oh my God, I love that.
And I was like, dude, I am not saying no. I'm going to keep coming in. And then finally, it wasn't even in the office. I think it was at the Starbucks that was on the corner of 4th and Island. I don't know if it's still there, but it was kitty corner to kind of like where La Puerta currently is. Okay. And I'm walking into Starbucks to just get a coffee, and she's standing there with the AGM. And I'm like, hey, Ruth, what's going on? And she was like, oh, and I could just tell. She's like, you again. And then finally she pulls me aside and she was like, all right, check it out. I am not offering you a job. However, I have a lot of staff members that are looking to have New Year's Eve off. If I give you one chance to come in and bartend, because I need a bartender this night, because I have a lot of staff members that want to go do whatever they want to do, will you stop coming in? I was like, yeah, give me one chance. So I go in, I work on New Year's Eve. I'm working the absolute worst well in the entire club. It buds up against the wall. It's the worst spot in the entire club to work. And I was the new guy, so of course. Yeah. It's like, when a new artist comes in, you don't give them the premier booth at the front of the shop. You got to work wherever. Yeah. And then so she's running sales reports for everyone at the end of the night, and she runs my sales report, and she comes up to me and she's like, who was ringing on your register? I'm like, just me. She's like, that's impossible. I'm like, how is that impossible? She's like, no one ever rings this much in this register. What's going on? I'm like, do you want me to be honest? She's like, yeah, be honest. And I was like, all right. I called every single one of my friends that I knew I could count on, and I asked them to come in and spend money on my well because I had a feeling you were going to run sales reports at the end of the night. And she's like, you seriously did that to impress me? And I'm like, yeah, seriously. And she's like, wow, you really want to work here? And I'm like, I want to work here so bad. She's like, all right, I'm still not offering you a job, but we're going to be in contact. And then she finally was like, hey, I'll put you on call. You still don't have a job, but I'll put you on call. And if I need you and I call you, will you come in? And I was like, I will come in every single time. And there were nights like I'd be out with my friends, like about to be, a couple drinks deep, and I'd get the phone call and I was like, no, I'm going in. And I understand her vantage point, because at that time, there were only like 4 really good nightclubs in San Diego, and everybody
highly sought after positions.
Oh yeah, and everybody that worked at this club, they were insanely competent, really smart, but basically everyone, with almost no exceptions, also looked like a supermodel. And then there was me. So I was like, I got to do.
I don't know. You're a pretty good looking dude.
Yeah, but I'm not to that level, right? I'm not getting a modeling job anytime, today or 10 years ago. So I was like, all right, I got to be the best of the best or whatever. So every time she called me, I was like, coming in, no matter what. And then within a year or two, I was one of the lead bartenders there. And then, at 22, 23 years old, I think my best year working there, after taxes, I took home like 130.
Wow.
That was good. We had nights where, you'd walk out with $700, $800, sometimes $1,000 in a night.
That's killer. But the really killer part about that story is your perseverance. I told people in the beginning of this episode, I wanted everyone to hear your story because it is the story of somebody who just made it. And this is the stuff people do that make it. You can't just stop every time a door shuts in your face, and you can't let it get you down. You just got to stick to it. And I love it. I've never heard this part of your life before. We usually talk about deep philosophical stuff. I never got just the core, like this stuff, That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. You work in service, or even if you're a busser, like, be the best busser you could ever be. Treat it like it's your career. You have no idea the power that comes along with the different people that you interact with. And if you do the right thing for the right person on the right day at the right time, you never know what door that's going to open up for you.
100%.
And I feel like that mentality really kind of helped me open up the next few doors of my career evolution, because working in the club, one of the things that really taught me was be fast, be efficient, be intentional. Your interaction times with people are not very big, so you don't really create relationships with people in the club environment. It's just like, be fast, be efficient, show up, be ready to work, take care of your coworkers, know where your boundaries when people are kind of acting out of line, know when to get security involved, and then just be efficient and be fast. And, so I was making, in my sphere of the world, being 23 and taking home $120,000, $130,000 plus at the end of the year, that was a lot of money.
That's 20 years ago too.
Yeah. 20 years ago.
You were killing it.
Yeah. So I got friends that work in the same sphere as I do, going to Vegas every week, driving BMWs, getting bottle service, living large, wearing nice clothes. I don't know if you can tell by the clothes that I showed up in today, but I don't really care about any of that stuff. I invest in experiences and art, and outside of that, I don't really care about things. And my friends would make fun of me. They're like, dude, you're still driving that busted ass Jetta? And I'm like, yeah, I got a plan though, but that's you do you. I'm not, whatever you're doing for yourself, if you feel good about your decisions, keep doing it. I fully support you, but I have a plan.
Yeah. And you did.
Yeah. So then one day we have a staff meeting, and the owners of the club are like, hey, our club is getting a little bit dated. And one of the unfortunate things about the nightclub scene is that you kind of have to be the newest, shiniest thing on the block to get the attention of the fly. The flies get attracted to the brightest light in the room. And we weren't that thing anymore. On Broadway was there. Some newer clubs had opened. And
maybe Voyeur at that time?
Yeah, Voyeur was there. I think maybe Aubergine was right at the tail end. And then I'm drawing a blank of what the other club, but there was a newer club that had opened that was like all the rage. And then, we start to lose a little bit of our mojo. So the owners are like, hey, let's do a little bit of refreshing on the club. So they asked in a staff meeting, they're like, hey, we're looking to do a little bit of demo. Does anyone want to volunteer their time to come and help us? And I'm looking around the room, and no one raised their hand. And I'm like, I'll come in. And my staff members are like, what are you doing? Like, why would you come in and work, even if it's just for your wage? Because I think at that time, minimum wage was like $7.25. They're like, dude, you make $1,000 in a night. You're going to come in here and dig up concrete for $7.25 an hour, or whatever minimum wage was at the time? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And by the way, they know shit that I don't know. And I'm trying to get to their level. I love you guys. Like, this level's great. But if you want to up level, like, surround yourself with the people that are already doing the thing that you want to do. Because that's a cheat code. Because you could take the path that's unknown and forge that for yourself, but that's going to take you a lot of time. If you know people that have already done it, why not shave 7, 5, even if it's 2 years.
Right.
So I was like, I'm going to go and interface with these guys because they know some shit I don't know. And I bet you I could learn a lot from them. So I show up one day and we're jackhammering up tiles to kind of redo like a sleek finished concrete floor. And one of the owners of the club, he was just like, talking to me about, what I wanted to do in life and everything else. And then we get X amount into the conversation and he asked me, I asked him, I'm like, hey, if you had $75,000 or $100,000 in the bank and you were 25 and you had a very low cost of living and you could get by on almost nothing, what would you do? And he was like, wait, you're talking about yourself? And I'm like, yeah, I'm talking about myself. And he was like, you have $100,000 in the bank? I'm like, almost, yeah. And he was like, you drug dealer? And I'm like, no. He's like, no, you can tell me. I don't care. Like, people come through here on all sorts of stuff all the time. And I'm like, no, I don't sell drugs. He's like, how do you have that much money in the bank? And I'm like, Tyler, I work here 3 days a week. I have another job that I work 5 days a week. He's like, wait, there's only 7 days in a week. And I'm like, yeah, I work doubles a lot of days. He's like, how many days a week do you work? And I'm like, I work 6 days one week, 7 days the next week. He's like, how long have you been doing that? I'm like, I don't know, 2.5 years. He's like, wait, you've had like 2 days off a month for 2.5 years? I'm like, yeah. He's like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, I kind of came up with the strategy that if I'm always at work, I can't spend any money. And I remember that book that I read, The Millionaire Next Door. And it's like, dude, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you have to develop a lifestyle to subsidize that money, like if you're a lawyer and you got to get that $80,000 car to make sure that your clients know that you're real deal, or if you're a financier and you got to buy nice suits for people to take you seriously to manage their wealth portfolios or whatever, I'm like the gardener that has the beat up 1981 Toyota pickup truck and I can wear dirty clothes or whatever because no one expects anything from me. And I'm like, so yeah, I've been doing the 6 day one week, 7 day the next week grind, and I've been saving every penny because I knew a moment was going to present itself. What would you do? And he starts talking to me about stocks and investing and everything else. And I was like, well, I only have so much interest in that because I don't have direct control over where my money goes. And I'm also like kind of a person that has to believe in what they're doing. He's like, all right. He's like, do this. Hold on to your money. I'm going to call you in 2 to 3 months. We'll talk. So then I get a phone call from him one day. He's like, hey, I'll come to your house. I'll pick you up. Picks me up, drives me to PB, drives me up to this building that basically looked like a bomb went off right at the end of Grand Avenue, right there, Grand and Mission in Pacific Beach.
I know the area. I don't know which building, but yeah.
It was Firehouse.
Oh, okay. That was the project
Yeah.
that he drove you up to?
Yeah. And he was like, hey, Matt and I just bought this place. You want in? And I was like, yeah. I'm like, actually, I have my checkbook on me right now. What do you need? He's like, you brought a checkbook. I'm like, I just happen to have it on me. And he was like, yeah, we had some investors pull out last minute. I'm looking for, X amount of money. I'll just say $50,000. I'm like, I'll write you a check right now. I don't even care what it's for. And he's like, hold on, there's a caveat. He's like, if I bring you into this as an investor, I need you to come over as a manager.
Done.
I'm like, easy. He's like, because, we want someone that's invested in the business. And maybe you had opportunities early in your career where you had an opportunity to up level, but it required you to put some of your own, your own cheese on the table and run that risk with them.
My story's a little different because everything I have, I built myself.
Yeah.
I didn't, but yeah, I had to save and have capital ready to reinvest into my businesses throughout. If I didn't have it there, how could I expand? How could I buy the second location? So it's different, but this is great. The way that you made your way into that club, because everybody wants to be in that club and they're just wondering why they're not.
Yeah.
And you just explained a very articulate story about that's how you end up in those situations. You prepared, you saved, you focused, you knew when that opportunity knocked, you were going to be ready.
Yep.
That's a beautiful story, dude. I love that.
And
I love that.
And I was the dark horse out of the group. Like if you look at the way that like a lot of the classic boy bands were formulated, you always got like the 3 dudes in the front that are like super good looking. And there's always that weird dude in the back that has the braids or, just the funky one. I was the kid in the club that had a lip ring and pink hair and everything else. And everyone's like, who is that? Why, he does not fit here. What is he doing here? And I was the one that made it out on the other side. I mean, not the one. There was another person that got brought along for that ride. And he now has gone on to open his own restaurant as well. And so that opportunity, and then later down the road, I was talking to the owners and they were like, hey, that opportunity to come and do demo with us, it was kind of a litmus test to see which one of our staff members were really like invested. And you put up your hand. So I wrote my check. I got a receipt written on a cocktail napkin.
Wow.
Like I didn't even get a contract. And honestly, I didn't even care what the the percentage of ownership was. It ended up being a very handsome deal, and it worked out very well for me. But I didn't even care at the point. I was like, I just want this opportunity. And in hindsight, one of the things I've historically not done a great job, and I'm doing a much better job of now as I'm getting older, is advocating for myself and negotiating for myself. I do a great job of negotiating for other people, but I think, coming from that broken home, chaotic environment, you don't necessarily advocate for your own self-worth. Yeah. So I didn't ask. I made minimum wage as the bar manager there. I was happy with that. I wouldn't clock in for a lot of the hours that I was there because I wasn't trying to be a strain on the business. And we opened the spot, and here we are. I think 13. Matt Spencer just posted something on Facebook the other day, and I'm trying to think. Man, we might be 16 years old now.
Wow.
And
I used to go there all the time for lunch. It's real close to my other location in Pacific Beach. I love that place.
And I still get 4 checks a year. I just got a decent size. And I think I own like 1.5% of the place or something like that. Right. But I mean, I pay my rent from those checks.
That's so great, dude. That is inspiring. I know there's a ton of people who listen to this show who that is going to be, that's going to help them.
At that time, there wasn't a lot of people doing cocktails. I think there was like 6 or 8 of us that were really kind of invested in making real drinks. That was right around the time that Starline was opening up. Yeah, Starline Social Club. Yeah. Matt Hoyt, who, rest in peace. Unfortunately, he passed away not too long ago, but he was one of the main owners there. One of the first guys that was really kind of doing cool stuff with cocktails. There was like 6 or 8 of us, and it was funny because there wasn't a huge market for it. So we were just kind of making drinks for each other. I would go to so-and-so's bar, they would come into my bar, and then I got kind of smacked down in the process of learning how to make drinks because I'm very fortunate in terms of I have a very acute sense of smell and a very acute sense of taste. So it's very easy for me to be like, oh, I can smell this. This goes well with that. Bam, 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 done. Drink. Here you go. And then while I was kind of up my own ass and not doing my homework, and people were like, hey, have you read this book or that book? Or, and I was like, why would I read a book from 150 years ago? What do those guys know? And as a history major, I'm like, dude, you're such an asshole for not thinking that there was something from 100, 150 years ago that you could learn from. Because lo and behold, they knew a lot. And I noticed that through Nate's camp and some of the other bar groups that were taking cocktails really seriously, these guys and gals that I had a leg up on, all of a sudden, all these people are getting better than me. And I was like, wait, I have as much natural talent or more as all of these people. What are they doing that I'm not doing? Well, they were reading books. They were doing their homework. They were trying things. They were working in environments that were purely conducive to making cocktails. And then I was like, yeah, it's not just about having natural talent. So that's another thing I would tell anyone, that just because you have a natural gift for something, the person that maybe has the same gift that you have or a fraction of that gift, if they're willing to put in the time, it's only a matter of time before they're going to eclipse you and they're going to outrun you.
I have to jump in on that because that is another thing that echoes my own story in tattooing identically. I get into tattooing 30 years ago. Everybody that's in tattooing is a biker or a drug dealer. I'm generalizing. There's a few good cats out there, but that was a big part of the scene. Very easy for me to shine. I'm now the biggest talk of the town. I've only been tattooing 6 years. I was at Avalon. I had a year-long waiting list. A 6-year tattoo with a year-long waiting list 25 years ago. It was crazy. And I came to the scene with a large amount of natural talent. I'd been drawing my whole life. I knew I was good. At least I thought I was.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, some of these guys, well,
I was following the scene then.
Yeah. I just think that's a separate subject. I think a lot of the work I did back then, I'm not super as proud of as I was at the time. We'll put it that way. Sure. But as I'm doing that, there's other people who are studying. They're seeing the landscape of tattooing and realizing this is competitive industry. So they're, flying to Japan to visit Horiyoshi, or they're going to every tattoo convention, and meanwhile I'm just rolling in my career with this big long waiting with crushing it. But I noticed the same thing. It was probably year 8 or 9 in my career, and I saw people basically what I felt was passing me up. Yep. And that's when I went to the books. I started studying the art of tattooing. I started reading. I started looking at all the different artists that were out there, seeing what they were doing, that I wasn't doing. I started basically becoming a student again instead of a cocky, I know it all artist, and I'm still in that student mindset to this day. But I love how you put that, because that's what does happen when you just rely on your core talents, man. There's always a younger generation around you that want what you have, and they're fighting harder than you are today.
The wolf climbing the hill is hungrier than the wolf at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
So don't ever believe you're the wolf at the top of the hill. Even if you are, don't believe that.
Yeah, it's true.
Mind fuck yourself into not being the wolf at the top of the hill, because if you believe that, the wolf that's climbing the hill is going to take your spot.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, is I think when you get X amount of way into doing anything in life, when you're climbing, when you're in the ascension, it's easy to believe that you're better than you are. And then all of a sudden you get to a new vantage point and you can see what's out there. And you see how big the landscape is. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm not that good.
And for us, Instagram did that.
Oh, yeah, big time.
I mean, that's the other wave that hit the tattooing, was here we all are still thinking we're so great. Then Instagram opens up, and within a year or two, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Wait a sec, who's this? Wait. Who's this guy in Poland? Who's this guy in Spain? What the fuck are they doing in Australia? And suddenly it's like, oh my God, we're in a sea of mega talented artists. And then the fire was lit. Like, I think it's still lit. On anybody who wants to be a great tattooer, at least right now, they are all taking it very seriously, because Instagram showed us all.
And I think the other big piece of that was the internet and YouTube and people that had access to
Social media in general, right?
Yeah. But even before social media, right? People that had, I think, well, yeah, I guess YouTube is part of the social media thing. But even when the internet became a thing, when you could just go online and search for stuff.
Go to some website to a tattoo shop in Germany.
Yeah, totally.
Because before that, you had to fly to Germany, visit the place.
There wasn't that connectivity.
Right.
So I get very humbled in these people that are infinitely outpacing me. And that was right around the time that I think you and I started tattooing together. Because I think I saw you the first time to start my right sleeve. And I'd been tattooed in your shop. I got a leg piece from one of your artists there. And from Turk.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I got a thigh piece from Turk.
I do remember that now. That's ringing a bell. Yeah.
And that's kind of like where we first started to interact. And I remember one day I was in the shop getting tattooed by Turk or whatever, and Joe Rogan walked into the shop.
Oh, you were there when Joe was there?
Yeah. And I was like, you kind of looked at me and you're like, he's a really cool guy. It's all good. Just don't gawk at him, because he's a normal, likes his privacy. And I was just kind of starstruck. I was like, oh, wow, this is a real deal shop. And it's so funny, too, because I lived in an apartment in PB that shared an alley with the back alley of Guru.
I think I remember that, yeah.
And I walked into that shop because it was convenient. But I mean, I could have walked into a terrible shop. But I just happened to walk into that shop. And one of the things I really appreciated about your shop is that at that time, and it wasn't so much a thing, but maybe 5 years before that, it was very much a thing, where you'd walk up to a tattoo shop and there'd be dudes smoking cigarettes out front, like mean mugging you when you walked in. Yeah. And that was not the environment that you curated there. No. So I was getting tattooed at that shop. I got a leg piece, and then I was ready to kind of do something a little bit different. And I came in and we started talking, and that was when I really started getting into more interdimensional traveling.
Medicine.
Yeah.
And this is a time, I think the timelines might be a little bit skewed, but this is around the time when I had already done a lot of mushrooms and LSD as a young man, but that's when DMT, my first DMT experience happened, and I was on fire to create art, to try to create art that somehow echoed what I had experienced in those trips. And then we connected, and you start telling me the idea for that sleeve. Everybody, you can't see it right now, but it's basically, well, we'll get some shots and video. We'll
but I was, I went to a couple other shops and a couple other artists, and I said, hey, I want to get a space-time continuum tattoo where a spirit is sitting in between sitting in between the human construct of time at the bottom and then the infinite expansion abilities of what space is at the top. And I want to see this kind of spirit being transubstantiating from one existence to the next. And I said that to a couple artists, and they're like, what are you... What? They're like, get out of my shop. Or they didn't say get out of my shop, but they were just like, what are you talking about? And then I remember I came in and I pitched that idea to you, and immediately I could just see your eyes like, just get you.
Ding, ding, ding.
Well, and I think too, and this is another, off the topic of, kind of making it in life and whatever you're trying to do. But if you want to work with a contractor, regardless of what it is, especially if there's an artistic component of that contract art, the person who is competent, has a good resume. This is the floor, right? They have to have a good resume. They have to be competent. They have to have references or whatever. So let's say you have 10 people that all have that at the floor. The person that's most excited about doing your job is probably going to do the best job.
Yeah. Enthusiasm.
And I could just see your eyes light up, and I'm like, yeah, this is my guy. Done. I just, in that moment, I knew. So we talked about it, and then I showed you my other sleeve. I was like, hey, I kind of wanted to mirror this because I already have this. I know you didn't do this, but if you could kind of have these elements in the same spatial positions, and you were very amenable to that, and you were like, yep, I got you. And then it was so funny. This was also a really humbling thing. So I was like, so what? Do I come back next week, or how does this work? And you just start laughing, and you're like, no, my wait list is 2 years.
Oh my God. I hate when people bring these stories up.
No, but I was just like, 2 years. And you were like, yep. But just so you know, you don't have to wait 2 years. Here's portfolios of other artists that would, I think could maybe do this tattoo as well. And you can maybe get in 3 months or 6 months. And I was like, 3 months, 6 months. Like I thought I was able to come in like 2 weeks or whatever. Cause that'd have been not all of my experience, but some of my experience up until that point. And then I went home and I kind of marinated on it. And I was like, well, if people are willing to wait 2 years to get tattooed by this guy, it's got to be something. And then I remembered I was able to get in slightly. I think it was just under 2 years. Something opened up, and then you gave that opportunity to me. And I gotta be honest, Aaron, like not to big up you or jerk you off on your own show or whatever, but I was like, this guy's an artist. He's a business owner. He's a husband. He's a father, and he seems to be doing all of those things relatively well. I want to get on this guy's level. And I kind of like, not only did I really respect the art that you were putting out at the time, but I think coming from a broken home and, my parents getting divorced, I'm always looking for mentors, or I'm always looking for people that I can look up to. And I've that's been part of my ascension through everything I've done in life.
Thank you for that compliment. And if there's truth in there, that's the stuff I'm stoked to have been that guy for you. And trust me, I have needed that character in my life dozens of times as well. And if I was just maybe I said a few words, or maybe I inspired you in a certain way, and maybe it led you off after that experience.
Well, I was pretty new in my ascension of, I've always been a musician my entire life. I play in a band currently. There's an art component of making high level food and drinks. I've actually worked in kitchens at various points in my career, and I always really wanted to make really beautiful looking food and really beautiful looking drinks. And then also, just being a bartender, there's a performance art component of it, because you learn how to you're interacting with your canvas if you look at it from our artist perspective. And then I was moving from that kind of pure chaos art kind of component into a more orderly business owner component. And I was like, well, if I'm going to spend, 40 hours or however many hours it took to do this sleeve, I might as well spend it with someone that I kind of want to learn some stuff from. And then one other thing I would say to anyone that's watching the show, if you're going to get tattooed, especially if you're going to get a big tattoo and you're going to spend a lot of time with someone, without sounding like a total hippie or, someone that believes in crystals and whatever, which I do to a certain degree, you're allowing someone to make a permanent, energetic imprint on your skin that, assuming you don't get lasered off, you will carry for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Choose wisely.
Yeah, the energy the tattoo artist brings to those appointments is embedded in there. And if it's positive energy, that tattoo will probably be a very uplifting thing to look at every day. And if it's negative energy, or if it's just neutral energy, then that's with you. Yeah, I talk about that a lot. I'm glad you said it, though. I agree with that. And I think we had a connection, just a kinsmanship type of connection right out of the gate. So, and it had to have been that way, because back in those days, and still to this day, I don't really work with anybody that I don't. And it's not they're bad, I'm good, or vice versa. It's just like dating. You know.
Yeah.
You know when you meet a girl sometimes, like, oh, you're not the one. You're somebody's one.
Yeah, you're great. I mean, honestly, I've got a small handful of ex-girlfriends that I still talk to every now and again. Amazing people.
Yeah.
Just
wasn't the match. The match wasn't there. The energy wasn't there.
Did not match me the way that my wife matches me.
But we had that connection, and still do. And then, of course, gosh, I didn't know I made you wait that long, but I was...
That was your wait at the time, though.
Yeah.
It's not that you made me wait that time. That's just what your demand was.
Yeah.
And the other thing I remember you saying was like, I don't do small pieces. Like I'm at a point in my career where I want to do big, bold, large format stuff, and I've earned that. So I don't do small tattoos for the most part. You maybe make an exception here or there. And if I don't like your idea, I won't do it. And I was like, great. I'm fully aligned with all of that. That all lines up exactly with the way that I look at and think about business. So I'm in the process of getting this sleeve done. I'm randomly in Las Vegas one night. My brother is a very decorated military man, did 21 years in the United States Army, did numerous tours of Iraq, Afghanistan. I think he even went to Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I think he was getting some award. I can't remember if he was getting a Bronze Star or whatever, but he was getting a big deal award at a military dinner in Vegas. He hit me up. He was like, hey, I'm going to be very close to you. This is really important to me. Can you come out? And I was like, yeah, I'll come out for sure. And I, had a girlfriend at the time or whatever. So she and I went out to Vegas, and the award dinner was at the Top of the World restaurant in the Stratosphere. So I'm waiting in this super long line, and the line is like not moving, and it's not moving, and it's not moving. And I'm like looking at my watch or my phone or whatever, and I'm looking at the time, and I was like, and I look at my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, I'm about to be late to this dinner. And my older brother is one of the few people on the face of the planet that I'm actually really afraid of. I cannot be late to this. So I'm like, whatever, stay in line, just hold our place. So I walk to the front of the line. I walk up to the very front of the line, and there's the typical big, huge bouncer at the front of the line. I mean, this guy was 6'5" plus and probably 300-ish pounds. And just stern look on his face. And I was like, hey, I'm not trying to be that guy. He's like, yeah, you already are. What do you got? And I'm like, damn it, this is already not starting. This is not starting well. And I was like, so, hey, my brother's at the military dinner that's upstairs. I'm sure you probably know about it. He's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, and I'm on the list for sure. And I'm about to be late to his dinner. And he's getting an award. And by the way, like, he's not much smaller than you, but I'm way more afraid of him than I am of you right now. Is there any way you can help me get to the, because I can't miss this dinner. He's like, what's your name? I give him my name. He's like, yeah, you're on the list. You're good. He's like, you have a +1. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I feel you. I was actually in the military too. I get it. Then I looked back and I was like, well, what's the story with this guy? Because you guys have been talking for 5 or 7 minutes. And he was like, yeah, he won't leave me alone because he says he needs to get up to the restaurant, but he's not on the list. So I turned to the dude. I was like, what's going on? And he's holding a wooden box that has 3 bottles of tequila inside of it. And he was like, yeah, I'm supposed to be meeting the bar manager, but they forgot to put me on the list. And, security's kind of tight at this point in time and everything else. And he's like, yeah, he just won't let me up. So I look back at the bouncer and I'm like, hey, man, he's just a tequila salesperson. And by the way, I've tasted that tequila. This
is Guillermo.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I love this.
And I'm like, this might be the best tequila I've ever tasted. And he's like, you're serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm dead serious. He's like, what do you do? I'm like, I work in bars and nightclubs. He's like, where do you work? I'm like, San Diego. He's like, who do you work for? I'm like, SDCM. He was like, oh, yeah, like the guys from DJ Here. And I'm like, yeah, you know DJ Here? He's like, yeah, they promote events in Vegas. He's like, who's the owner? I'm like, Matt Spencer. I'm like, who are his best promoters? I'm like, Chris and Pat English and Pat Eckstein. I started name, and he's like, okay, you are who you say you are. He's like, I know. He's like, I know that group. He's like, this tequila is really good. And I'm like, dude, it is so good. He's like, give me your ID again. He grabs my ID again, and he's probably messing with me. He's like, I know your name, I know your address. He's like, if this tequila sucks, I'm gonna come find you. And he looks at the guy. He's like, you can get in the elevator too.
That was the beginning of your relationship with
Guillermo Souza.
The owner or the current CEO of Fortaleza.
Owner operator of Fortaleza Tequila, 5th generation tequila maker from the Souza family. So I didn't know it at the time. And one of the things that you get trained to do as a bartender is, and you have a financial incentive to do so because you get tips, right? But one of the things that being a bartender for 20 plus years taught me was like, do nice things for people, even if you don't think that there's anything on the other side of it for you. Because what do you have to risk? Your time? That's fine. So I find myself wanting to do really nice things for people because I've had the financial incentive to be that way when, attending to a guest's need. And at that time, I could tell that he was just some dude that needed something. And honestly, I just thought he was a salesperson. So Guillermo's Mexican on his mom's side, but he's Scandinavian. I can't remember if he's Swedish but he's Scandinavian on his father's side. He looks hella white. Let's just put all the cards on the table. I had no idea who he was. I just thought he was some sales guy. So we get in the elevator together, and he was like, wow, that was really good. And I'm like, yeah, I bartend, and, I get the gift of gab, and, I get paid to talk to people. No harm, no foul. And by the way, that's really fucking good tequila. I've tasted it. It's unbelievable. And I'm like, my name's Adam. Anyway, nice to meet you. And he's like, oh, nice to meet you. He's like, my name is Guillermo. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because I do my homework, And I was like, oh, this is Guillermo Souza. And he was like, where do you live? And I'm like, oh, I live in San Diego. He's like, oh, I live in San Diego. He's like, what part of San Diego are you in? I'm like, oh, I'm in Pacific Beach. He's like, oh, I live in La Jolla. I'm one community north of you. He's like, we're going to hang out. Give me your phone number. And I'm like, okay, I just thought he was being nice. So I give him my phone number. He's like, where do you live? And I'm like, oh, I live at Felspar and like Dawes, like right on the other side of Guru, Right. And he was like, cool, I'm going to call you. We're going to hang out. And then he has a very distinguished voice. He sounds like he's been smoking Marlboro Reds for like 150 years. He's got one of those like Tom Waits,
he does.
gravelly, sandpapery voices. So anyway, I'm just minding my own business. I'm at home. Phone call from a number I don't recognize. Pick up the phone. And he's like, yeah, is this Adam? And I was like, dude, is this fucking Guillermo? And I'm like, yeah, is this Guillermo? And he was like, yeah. He's like, you said you live at like Felspar and Dawes, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I'm down the street from your house. He's like, are you at home? I'm like, yeah. He's like, cool, I'm going to come pick you up. You want to hang out? I'm like, yeah. So literally comes, swoops me up. He's like, you ever been to Cantina Mayuel? Have you ever been to Cantina Mayuel in North Park?
No.
Put it on your short list of places to go.
All right, I'll write it down.
One of the absolute best places.
You'll give me that later.
Yeah. So he picks me up, takes me to Cantina Mayuel, introduces me to Larry, who's the owner operator there. Hanging out, drinking tequila, talking. We get to know each other. Hung out a small.
Would it be appropriate for us to have a small glass of tequila while we have this part of the discussion?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to pour us 2 little snorts, and we're going to continue this. This is the tequila segment.
Done and done.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We're an hour and 20 in. That's the capacity of my 52-year-old bladder. So that's just the way it goes. I'll admit it. But while we took our break, and we're on the subject of tequila, and I know we're going to continue this story about Guillermo because I love how you made that connection. I've always wondered how you became connected to the Fortaleza family.
Yeah, elevator in Vegas.
And well, it's not just that. It's just the way you did that, the way you opened that opportunity for a stranger, not knowing there'd be anything for you in the deal. No,
I thought he was a sales guy.
Right, you're just being a nice person, basically. Yeah. That's just such a great tale of karma.
Totally.
Just doing something nice, and the universe gave you something nice back. But just so the viewers who are listening know, we are actually not drinking Fortaleza. I didn't have any with me today. I should have probably brought some. I knew this subject. We're having some chamucos and Yeho. So a little toast real quick while we sip on this, and then pick it up where we left off.
So in Mexico, when you toast, you usually say salud.
Okay.
And then if you're ever toasting mezcal, the indigenous, I think it's a Zapotec term that comes from the indigenous people of Oaxaca, they say dishbe when they cheers.
If it's mezcal.
If it's mezcal. Dishbe.
Dishbe.
And then the
salud.
Salud is the Spanish word. So we're drinking tequila, salud.
Salud.
Yeah. So a couple things about this specifically. It's an añejo tequila, which...
Can I add real quick before
please.
you go down this? Adam is and I don't know if I'm doing the term right, but you're basically a tequila sommelier.
Yeah.
And isn't there a term for it?
Yeah, so I haven't gone through the formal training of becoming a catador.
Okay.
But I sit on a number of different blind tasting panels. I think there's 144 full-time operational tequila producing facilities that make tequila year-round. I think I've been to like 80 of them.
Okay. It's fair to say you're an expert in tequila. You're an expert in spirits in general, but tequila is your kind of like...
It's my backyard.
It's your specialty.
I would say this. So I have friends that don't do hospitality only. I have friends that don't do hospitality in the sense of they don't own bars, they don't work in bars, they're not restaurants. Really close friends of mine actually own tastetequila.net, and they actually also own a tequila app, which if you guys are watching this and you're into tequila, get out your phone right now and download Tequila Matchmaker, because it is hands down the best app for knowing institutional knowledge about tequila, and it's completely free of bias because they didn't take any brand sponsorship money when they built out this app. So I have friends that don't do hospitality, don't own businesses. All they are is tequila aficionados and experts. I can barely stand in their shadow in terms of knowledge because that's all they do. Right. Whereas I have to be more of kind of a renaissance man. Being a business owner, I got to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, or whatever. But I know more than the average person. But I absolutely know what I don't know.
Okay.
But the things I will talk on, I will say definitively are 100% true, or at least true today. And the tough thing about artisanal spirits from Mexico, especially when we talk about mezcal, and just so you guys know, historically speaking, tequila is a type of mezcal. All tequila is mezcal, but not all mezcal is tequila. Mezcal comes from 2 indigenous Nahuatl words. One being metal, M-E-T-L, which is an indigenous word for agave. Maguey is another one. So like del maguey mezcal of the maguey plant. So the Spanish word is agave. The 2 of the indigenous words, maguey being one, metal being the Nahuatl word. So metal, and then the other word is ishkale, and ishkale means to cook. So the Spaniards heard metal ishkale, mezcal. That's where the term mezcal comes from. That's cool. And I believe of 31 different states in Mexico, 29-ish, I could be slightly off on that number, but I think 29 have some sort of written record of making agave-based spirits as part of their history, their state history. But currently, under the designations of appellation for legal mezcal production, I think only 10 states can legally make mezcal, even though 29 have some kind of historic history of making it. So historically speaking, what historically was and what legally is are not the same thing, because there are laws that dictate these things. But for all intents and purposes, tequila is a type of mezcal. It's made from one specific type of agave, the Blue Weber agave, and it can only be made in the entire state of Jalisco and then four other states, parts of four other states that mostly butt up against Jalisco, Tamaulipas being the outlier.
Okay.
Whereas mezcal production, it's usually the entirety of states, unless mezcal and tequila production overlap with each other. If you're using Blue Weber within the tequila DO, you're making tequila. If you're using any other agave inside or outside of that, you're making mezcal.
Interesting. All right.
So añejo tequilas by Mexican law have to be aged for a minimum of 1 year in oak. And it doesn't designate the style of oak. So historically, they've always used, or they've mostly used American oak. So they're repurposing barrels that you get from companies like Jim Beam or Jack Daniels. One of the things we like to say in the spirits world is that bourbon production is wasteful on a uniquely American scale. Jason O'Brien, shout to you for coining that one. One of my favorite bartenders in the entire country. So bourbon production, they have to use new charred American oak.
Right.
Once you use it once, gone. Can't use it again. So it creates like a secondary market for aging, for rum, for sherry, for tequila. And the other thing too is agave is such a delicate plant source to make a spirit from that you don't want to mask it too much. So most of the good tequila producers are either using used American oak, and then now you're starting to see the use of other types of oak, used French, new French, everything else. So añejo tequila, minimum 1 year aged in a barrel that's no bigger than 600 liters, I believe is what the DOs say for tequila. And tequila is one of the only things in the world that has a designation of appellation. They have laws that mandate the way it can and cannot be made, similar to champagne or the way that various cheeses have designations of appellation. Cognac has one. We have one in the United States for bourbon. They have one in Mexico for tequila. And I think the reason why tequila became the heritage spirit that came onto the American markets before mezcal or bacanora or raicilla is because tequila, traditionally, the agaves are cooked in a steam oven above ground versus baked in a fire pit oven underground like mezcal. It's not smoky. And I think most whiskey drinkers would agree that bourbon's maybe a little bit more approachable than scotch is because you don't have the smoke component.
Right.
Tequila's a little bit more approachable to the average palate than mezcal is.
Yeah, it
So
is.
you don't have the smoke component.
Right.
So
More marketable. More people are going to drink it.
yeah. So anyway, going back to my story about Guillermo, I meet this guy in an elevator who I just think is a sales guy because he kind of looks white-ish. Lo and behold, it's Guillermo Souza, the Souza family. Well, his great-great-grandfather was the first person to import tequila into the United States.
Wow.
Took a single horse-drawn carriage, I think 2,000 plus miles through the rocky terrain of where I think he went into like El Paso, Texas, or somewhere right where the southern portion of Texas meets Mexico, and was the first importer of tequila in the United States.
Wow.
So he has all that family lineage kind of to back up his story. So we become friends. Randomly one day he calls me and he's like, I've got this trade show thing. Do you want to come work the booth with me? Sure. Hey, I got this other event. Will you come work with me? Sure. And then I just doing a lot of one-off work for him. And then finally he's like, hey, we got something going. Like, let's level up. And I was like, all right, what do you have in mind? He's like, I got to go open the Chicago market. Come to Chicago with me for a week. Help me train the salespeople. I'll introduce you to all the bartenders out there. Cool. Figure out a way with my schedule. At that time, I was working at Vinda Syrah. Talked to Matt. I was like, hey, can I get a little time off? He's like, yeah, dude, you got the tequila. Matt loves tequila, by the way. Huge tequila drinker. He's like, yeah, what's good for you? If you get more tequila knowledge, I'll be a passenger on that journey.
Right.
So he was always very supportive of my tequila endeavors. So I went to Chicago for, a week, 10 days, opened the market there. I actually got to go to New York with Guillermo to open the market out there. And then, so one of the things Guillermo had me do when we would get in with new distributors, he would say, hey, I brought Adam along, not to give you any education, because like that's what I'm here for. And he can't really train you on anything that I can't because I'm in the facility and he's not. I know more than he does. However, Adam's been a bar manager for a really long time. He's going to tell you everything that a bar manager will say to you about why they can't bring the product in. And then he's going to teach you the Uno reverse card on how to get around that. Because bar managers always have reasons to either bring in product or to not bring in product.
Right.
And then I got to test out some of my own theories one day. We went into New York to sell into the New York market. And Guillermo's like, all right, we're going to divide and conquer today. It's our first day selling into the market. I'm taking Manhattan because I'm Guillermo. I'll give you Brooklyn. Because especially at that time, it was a much smaller market. Brooklyn's amazing now. It's every bit as awesome as Manhattan, if not more, in some in some ways or another. He's like, I'm going to give you, I think he gave me like 10 or 11 accounts. And then I think he had like 14 or 15. He's like, if you sell into 4, I'll be very proud of you. I was like, all right, cool. So we go out, we go on our own sales paths or whatever. The very end of the day, you know, like I think it was like 7 or 8 that night when we met up, because, you know, you want FaceTime with people, you're educating them on a product, you're trying to sell them on a product and everything else. So it was a long day. It took, you know, at least 8, if not 9 or 10 hours. We meet back up at the end of the day, and I'm like, how many accounts did you sell into? I think he had like 14. How many accounts do you think he sold into?
I don't know whether to go super low or super high. I would expect him to do very well. I've met the man. He's crazy charismatic, and I think he nailed all of them.
He sold into every single one.
I nailed the answer. I feel like a winner.
Yeah. He's
No,
like,
I've met Guillermo because of you.
Yeah.
I was down in Jalisco, and I got to go to the Fortaleza distillery.
and so you got to see his hacienda.
Oh, yeah. The whole thing.
That's where I got
Tour.
married, by the way.
No shit.
I got married on that property.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. But he's so charming.
Oh, my God. That guy could, right away, I was with a group of people. He had everybody just mesmerized. I was the man because I knew him, and I didn't even know him. I only knew him through you.
Totally.
So it doesn't surprise me that he sold all 14 accounts.
Yeah, he's like, I sold into all of them. I'm like, of course you did. You're Camel. He's like, how'd you do today? And I'm like, I did all right. He's like, all right. Of your 11, how many accounts you selling to? I was like, 10.
Damn, not bad for the gringo. Wow, dude. I love this. I love you. I love your story. I don't know if we're are we?
No, I mean, we can
That's
keep-
we kind of rounded out at least your journey.
Yeah.
In business and in life. And I just think it's great. I think in that story, there's so many inspirational moments of not giving up, perseverance, willingness to be honest with yourself, which I think is a huge one for people, is just be real, man. Did you really do your best today? Could you have been kinder? Answer those questions honestly on a daily basis and grow from that. And seeing you today after all of our years ago tattooing so much together, I can see the change in you. I loved you then, but you're a different man now, a better man.
Completely different.
It's
I mean, the same, but completely different.
yeah, no, and especially in the regards to your the empathy factor. And I remember when I first met you, I liked you right away, but I remember sensing that about you, like, wow, he's kind of like Spock from Star Trek, you know, just very cold and straightforward. Yes, if I've called him in the middle of the night, he'd probably still come help me. He's not evil. Mm-hmm. It's just he's just very focused, and I could tell you were not paying attention to the subtleties of emotions around you at the time. And I found it interesting, actually. I just observed you, and I just got to know you better. And slowly our relationship deepened, and I saw that inner warm part of you. But now it just shines straight forward. So the work has been done. I'm feeling it 100% on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
And another interesting part of the story is at some point in the earlier part of our conversation, you had complimented me by saying that I was someone you wanted to be around, to learn from. And I'm grateful if I had any positive effect in your life. But sitting with you today, I feel like the tables have turned. Like I am, you know, the student becomes the master to some degree. You've inspired me on a few levels today. I'm going to be looking into some things, you know. So thank you for that. That's cool.
I appreciate you
And if
saying
that's
that.
how I'm feeling, I know a lot of you listening must be feeling the same way. Well, tattoos, we kind of covered that. I mean, the only thing I would say, I mean, do you want to speak about, I mean, we talked about the sleeve I did. Do you want to speak about your front panels that we did? Because they're very interesting, I think.
Yeah. So
Very metaphysical.
So, so my first and foremost, my favorite talking point of the story of the journey of getting my front panels done with you is, I think the first time I booked time with you to get my chest done, I was like, oh, go ahead and put me down for 8 hours. And you're like, you sure about that? And I was like, yeah, we've done 8 on my arm. And you're like, yeah, no, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I'm good for it. And you were like, no, dude, you're not. Like, I've sat with you before. And the very first time,
Very few people are on the torso, anywhere on the torso.
I think it takes a very specific type of people that have mastered meditation, or like, who's the guy that you tattoo that has the mountain goat tattoo?
Oh, Glenn.
Yeah, you
Glenn
got to be on.
Stewart, the toughest motherfucker. You listening, Glenn? Toughest motherfucker.
You got to be on that. You got to be on that level. And I'm not saying I couldn't get on that level if I put the time into it, but you got to be really at peace, and you got to be able to mentally go to places to kind of persevere for that, because you know you got 2-3 hours of pure adrenaline that gets you through tattooing, and man, once that adrenaline wears off, whew,
most people can ride that wave for 4 or 5 is about my line with people usually.
Yeah. That's usually, I would make it to 4 to 5
Yeah.
and then I would start.
But 6 hours, 7 hours on torso, on ribs, and places like that, I don't even do it anymore. I mean, I physically don't want to do it anymore. I'm too old and tired. I'm done after 5 hours. But younger tattooers still do it, and the people that sit that long are either on some really good medication,
or
they're in a different level. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I've had people that, Glenn, you mentioned, he's like a super athlete, so it makes sense with him. He's done Ironmans. He's ranked high on the climbers in America in his age group, and he just does hard things, and he's learned to suffer. He's learned to endure pain. That's part of his hobby, is to endure pain. He climbs mountains. He almost freezes to death up there, So he's okay with pain. He's made peace with pain.
Totally.
But then you meet other people who are just regular folks, and they're not super athletes, and the lady will lay down and just crank and be calm for 8 hours and not have a single problem, and she's just a housewife.
Well, I have another theory about why torso is so much more intense than extremities, and maybe you can give me perspective on this. Subconsciously, when someone has a needle down on your arm or your leg or your wrist, that you're like, I could still be alive if I don't have this.
Yes.
Okay, when someone puts a needle down on your chest,
yes,
or your stomach,
yes,
you're like, wait, I need all this.
That's 100% right. I mean, I don't know if it's right. It's been my theory my whole career.
Like, you're like,
your body knows behind your torso are things that if you don't have them, you die.
Yeah, you need all that.
You can lose arms, you can lose feet, you can lose legs,
fingers, whatever.
Right. So there's just there's something to that. The body it's very vulnerable. When there's needles being driven into your sternum, your heart is right beneath that, or on your lower kidneys, or on your ribs, and behind there are the lungs. The body is sending some very strong signals to you that this is dangerous and move away.
Yeah. And I think I got prepped for that when you did my armpit piece that we did the one and done on, because armpits suck.
You did. I forgot about we did your armpit.
And at some point I got to step up and do the other one. I was going to do the other one shortly after the first one, but after that first one, I was like, I'm going to take a break from that. I think that was like 13 years ago. Oh, wow. So armpit definitely prepared me for chest. Honestly, I don't want to say if it was worse. For me, this section
right beneath the breast,
is the worst.
It's something.
People say sides are okay. People say stomach.
I have my front down. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
that is the worst.
And then the other thing that you gave me a lot of insight and encouragement on, because I was going to get a back piece done with you, and you're like, nah, do your front first. Like, I know you want to do everything, don't finish with your front. Do your front now.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, sold. So I knew I wanted to get an Egyptian piece, and I always loved Anubis. I was like, he's the intermediary between the living and the dead. He's that person that takes you from one journey to the other. I already have a tattoo of a spirit transubstantiating from spirit form into molecular form. What better way to cap that off with an Egyptian piece and the intermediary between the living and the dead?
Yeah.
So I got my Anubis piece. I've got the Pyramids of Giza done on my chest. The idea that you had to put the Fibonacci sequence in that, and then all of that kind of spiraling together, I thought was just nothing short of genius. So then when I went to start to do my other side, I was like, okay, well, what is the balance of the intermediary between the living and the dead, the darkness or whatever? And I have a Virgin Mary tattoo on my left arm that was done by Denny Besnard. That was a piece that I got from my mother. And then I was like, okay, I want something kind of more soft, feminine. more
feminine energy.
Yeah, totally. And I know that, the whole gender discussion has become a tough one now that more and more people are identifying as non-binary and trans and everything else. And every entity is comprised of some amount of masculine and feminine energy. And those things aren't necessarily gendered. Like, I'm not a super manly man. Like, I have a lot of very effeminate qualities about myself. So when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, I think a lot of people are like, oh, you're forcing people into a binary of one or the other. And it's like, no. These are energies. And people that identify as trans or non-binary, oftentimes they have a confluence of both, and they don't necessarily identify as one or the other. Totally fine. That doesn't mean that yin and yang doesn't exist and masculine and feminine doesn't exist.
Right.
So I wanted, and I've also historically, I've struggled with balance. I'm a person of extremes. So I wanted my front-facing facade of how I embrace people and how I engage people to have a balanced approach, because I don't do well with balance. I've gotten much better as I've gotten older, especially since I've gotten married. But I wanted a yin to my yang. I wanted light to darkness. And then as I studied more about indigenous Mexican culture and the Aztecs and the Nahuatls and the Zapotec people or whatever, I learned about this mythological, or maybe she wasn't mythological, who knows, but this mythological deity named Mayuel, who was not only the goddess of fertility and life, but the agave plants were so important to the indigenous people of Mexico that they also considered her to be the goddess of agaves. And then I'm thinking about all these amazing friends I've met, all these journeys I've had, the fact that you can go to the site just outside of Mexico City, Teotihuacan, and they have a structure there that is oddly similar. If you look at the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Plaza of the Feathered Serpent that sits right in the middle, it looks almost identical to the layout of the Pyramids of Giza. And I was like, oof, I gotta bring balance to those two things. So I wanted to get Teotihuacan on my left side, which is the side that your heart leans into, which I thought was very appropriate. And then I wanted to get the goddess of fertility, life, and agaves on my other side. So I thought it was just cool balance. And then when I look at myself in the mirror without my shirt on, the very first thing I look at when I see both of those, I think about my journey through life and the fact that, I studied history. I had all these amazing adventures as someone in the tequila industry, but it reminds me to try to be a little bit more balanced. And that's something to this day I still struggle with, but I'm trying every day.
And you might till the day you die. That's just the journey.
I will.
That's beautiful. I mean, everyone's tattoos are beautiful, but I really think in your scenario, you really wrote a piece of poetry on your body. And I knew those facts before you just told everybody, but it's a well-composed story that echoes your actual personal life so accurately. And I'm just honored I got to put it on you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we got to spend 80 plus hours doing it.
Yeah, and we're not done. I mean,
I gotta man up to the task of finishing. Unfortunately, I had some health complications with an autoimmune disease that put me on the sideline for a little while, but I got on the other side of that, and I'm looking forward to getting back into it at some point.
only a few hours to go, and you're done.
Yeah.
No, and then who knows after that? Maybe you do your back or something else. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll get there. Who knows where the journey's going to take us?
Well, my friend, a toast. A toast. You got a little tequila still in there?
Pour me a little bit more.
Let's have a toast. There you go. All right. As I said at the beginning of this show, the opportunity to make friends like this through the journey of tattooing has been the greatest honor of my life. To see your story and how it inspired me today and how it'll inspire others and how it's only here and you're only here because of tattooing makes me bow in prayer, pose to the God of tattooing. We should figure out who that is, by the way.
Yeah.
It's got to be one somewhere written down.
It has to be. It's probably got to be in Japanese culture
gotta,
somewhere. There has to be something.
Help me with that. You're a historian. So in honor of all that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story with me and everybody else. And thank you for being a person who actually wants to make change to help this world. And we didn't get much into that today because I think there's a part 2 with us.
Maybe there might be a part 2.
There's going to be a part 2 because I know a lot more about your social active work that you do in your community and some of the plans you have, especially in the San Francisco, Oakland area.
I never thought I would be sitting in a chair one day saying that I'm an activist, but I've now become an activist.
You are.
Because I have no other choice.
And I know some of those ideas, and they are groundbreaking, and they're beautiful.
If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, if you're coming up in the bar restaurant space and you want to up level and you want to do this, and I'm dead serious when I say this, email me. My email is adam@farmleaguemgmt.com. MGMT, like as the abbreviation for management.
Right.
Farm League, just like the baseball farm leagues. We actually named our company that because we wanted to take people who are aspiring to be at one level and up level. That's why we called Joel and we named our company Farm League. And if you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you want to up level and you want advice on how to get to the next level, you can email me. I'll set up a time to talk to you. You can have as much time as I feel like I owe it to people that were me 15, 20 years ago to invest in them. I don't care if you're a stranger, email me. I'll tell you everything I know. And my partner's the same way, fully transparent. It's crazy. I have a business partner. We look at the world completely differently, but he's top 5 people I've ever met in my entire life. And he's the same way. He's the most open, giving, loving person. And we create time and space for people that want to get to where we've gotten. And we're not even, we're mid-level. We're not even big fish. I don't even know if I want to be a big fish. I think I'd rather just be a medium fish that helps create.
You're accessible.
Yeah, well, that's
You know?
the.
I don't think the big fish are saying that on podcasts.
Yeah.
Email me. I'll set aside.
I'm
some
dead serious.
personal
Email
time.
me, Adam at Farm League MGMT. I'll help. I'll give you as much insight and perspective. And I'm not. I could be wrong about a lot of things, but I'll at least give you a perspective that might be different than your own.
Oh, it's beautiful, dude. I love your the giving back aspect of your life. It really, and you were talking this stuff, 15 years ago when I was tattooing you, but you've really brought it to life.
Well, it's easy when you don't like shit. I don't really care about material things. I value experiences, and getting to invest in people that have aspirations to do cool shit. That's an experience. I want to invest in that.
Wise words, my friend. They've interviewed dying people over and over again, and they'll tell you the same thing every time. What do you really, really care about? Relationships.
Yeah, and it's not the things. It's the decisions I was afraid to make, and the time I didn't spend with my family and my friends, and the things that no one thinks about all the material shit that they're gonna leave behind. No, because none of that means anything.
And if you are thinking about that on the day of your death, I don't think it went so well.
No, definitely not.
If you're crying, I'm about ready to go to the other side. What about my mansion? Oh
Yeah.
no.
Well, hopefully, in the next time you get to come back to this physical space, or maybe another one, because I dare say this is the only one.
Right.
Hopefully, you course correct next time.
Yeah. I'm sure the universe has a plan for people like that.
That it does.
All right. Cheers one last time. Thank
Yep.
you for coming out. Thank you for tuning in. Until the next episode, I appreciate all the likes, the comments. Keep them coming. And if you guys have guests out there that you think would be great for the show, shoot them my way. I'd love to hear from you. Cheers.
Salud.
Salud.